Well, MAGA's discontent is continuing to grow. The natives are getting restless, and they are getting a little pissed off, I have to say. I ran across this today from Ann Vandersteel, who has trademarked her name. TM. I trademark her name. Okay, that's new. Uh, she says it's a letter to Trump. It's a tweet letter to Trump. I mean, why not tweet it, right? That's how he communicates with Pam Bondi, so I guess that's a good way to reach him. She starts off, she says, your second year begins in 22 days, and I must say I'm a little concerned. We, MAGA, gave you the presidency, a solid House majority and a 53-seat Senate and a conservative Supreme Court. Wait, MAGA gave him the conservative Supreme Court? Or he had something to do with that, right? I think so. Anyway, she goes on, not one high-profile deep state felon, traitor, or election meddler has been prosecuted. I'm going to refute all these in a minute, but let's read through them and see what she has to say to get a sense of what she's feeling and what they're feeling. All right, not one high-profile felon or deep state, person, traitor, blah, 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 has been prosecuted. Wow. Billions still flow to Ukraine and foreign wars we, the people, don't benefit from. I mean, just the massive amount of misinformation these people have. Like, they don't even know what's going on. Yet they feel, they feel warranted to trademark their names because they have things that are so important to say. And they have no idea what they're talking about. No idea. We'll get into that in a minute. Okay, so that's Ukraine. Mass deportation started strong, but millions of illegals still remain, while amnesty whispers haunt us. DEI got gutted in the federal agencies, but woke hiring policies still secretly infest most of American schools and industries. Just think about this for a minute as I read through these and see if you don't feel it and kind of see it. She's literally calling for a dictatorial government, for an authoritarian regime to take over. She's literally saying, you, Mr. President, you got to make all these things happen. Anyway, I'll get into that in a minute. Big media faces lawsuits but continues to hide behind the First Amendment to spread lies and information. Yeah, that's what the First Amendment's for, right? To protect the media, to protect all of us from free speech, or so we can have free speech, not to protect us from free speech, but to protect our free speech. Okay, FBI reforms promise but no public accounting for Russiagate or January 6th overreach or 2020 election steal. Talk about upside down thinking. Abortion funding quietly continues through loopholes, and RINOs are already maneuvering to throw the primaries to the Democrats. Delusional. Mr. President, MAGA fought like hell to give you the power to make America great again. Instead, you give us half measures, incompetent appointees, and excuses. Well, that's what I can agree with. This is about the only thing I can't agree with in this this little tirade she's having here. Incompetent appointees, boy. But to think that she thinks that too is a little scary because you know what? This is good in that his base is starting to drift away, starting to become anxious, starting to become upset with him. That's all good. But they're becoming upset for all the wrong reasons. They are literally becoming upset because he's not dictator enough. So when she says incompetent appointees, we think, yeah, they're definitely incompetent. But what she means is they're not strong enough and they're not dictatorial enough. Sir, I pray that your first year was just a warm up and that we will hear the fat lady singing to Democrats, we're not going to take it in the very near future. Oh man, this revenge mentality and this mentality that Democrats are evil incarnate. And I was a lifelong Republican. I disagreed with Democrats on a lot of things for most of my life, but I never thought they were evil. I didn't want to eat them for breakfast, you know. But these people, they are just out for blood. They're literally out for blood. But and the just the illogic here and the lack of information. Sir, I pray that your first year was just a warm up. This ain't his first year. It's his 5th year. Remember, he was president once before. This is his 5th year. 5th try. 5th try is the charm. Isn't that what they say? Yeah. Patriotically yours. There's nothing patriotic about anything she said, and I'm going to show you why in just a minute. But first, let's look at some of these responses because they're pretty revealing too. Belan F says, "This is so true. I've just recently heard my friends who have been avid Trump supporters talking negatively about what isn't happening. Some of the things mentioned here." And then look at this. "We know a lot of it's not Trump's fault. No, not our hero, not our idol. He can do no wrong. It's not his fault. But he has the power to call them all to attention, stop bragging on the Republican leadership, and explain the facts to them. The House and Senate are not delivering, and neither is the DOJ." Whoa, neither is the DOJ. Okay. "Never thought I would see the day when they were wavering in their support." I'm telling you, this is the party of this is the party where they eat their own. I mean, you get one step out of line and they're going to throw you to the wolves, really. Anyway, David Larry here had a good comment, as Larry David would. "It's never his fault, is it? Why not start holding him accountable?" Yeah, now there's some common sense. Let's see. "We know a lot of it's not Trump's fault. Come on, wake up. When will you ever hold him accountable for his own administration?" So there are a few good people in here. And then this lady, Christine in Texas, "The buck stops with Trump. I and my entire family, all 3-time Trump's voters, have lost trust in him and his administration. It's sure looking like MAGA, not MAGA. Oh, make Israel great again." She's on the Candace Owen bandwagon, I guess. Wow. All right. Anyway, but this is interesting to me. We know a lot of it is not Trump's fault. Do you know, if you talk to people who lived under Hitler, and we can't really do that anymore because they've all passed on, but back when they were still alive in the late 20th century, if you talk to them, they would tell you, yeah, some bad stuff happened, but it wasn't Hitler's fault. They still support Hitler. I mean, it's really discouraging that people for their whole lives, once they start following and idolizing one of these cult leaders, they literally never stop. They never get the point. And when it turns out that everything falls apart, they just pass the blame on to somebody else. It couldn't be their guy. I mean, there were people who still supported Stalin years after he had died, and after all the murders and the killings and all the deaths came to light, they still supported Stalin, even though he had them living, like prisoners in their own country. It's really unbelievable how people just can't let go of these people. But let me address some of these things she said. She said, "Still no nationwide voter ID laws." Okay, listen. Voter ID law, she says there's no voter ID laws, but this is a failed argument because a federal voter ID mandate would violate the Constitution. Elections are run by the state. So here you have somebody who knows nothing about the Constitution, but she's pontificating with a trademark on her name because she's so good at it, on the fact that there should be a nationwide voter ID law. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. Even conservative legal scholars acknowledge this would trigger immediate injunctions. States already control voter ID laws, and many Republican states have strict ID requirements already. Federal overreach here would be quickly struck down. Okay. "Not one high-profile deep state felon, traitor, or election meddler has been prosecuted." Yeah, well, there's a reason for that. Because there's no legal category called deep state. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. Prosecutors must bring evidence, not vibes or tweets. The Department of Justice can't indict people to satisfy political narratives, and you can't just say, "Oh, he's part of the deep state," and indict them on that. There's no crime called deep state. I mean, what does that mean anyway? And nobody's ever identified any of these people who were part of the so-called deep state. They've never been identified, never. But look, demanding prosecutions without evidence is literally how authoritarian systems work. So again, she's calling, and all of her friends and all the MAGA supporters are calling, whether they know it or not. And I don't think a lot of them know it, but they got to wake up and look around at what they're doing. They're calling for an authoritarian regime. They're calling for authoritarianism. That's what they want. Look how many times she says, Mr. President, you got to make them do this and you got to make them do that. She says this down lower. She goes, you got to make the RINOs in Congress do what you say. It's not how our system works. The president doesn't make them do things. They work together, they negotiate, they make deals back and forth, but you can't make them do it. Okay. All right. She says, here's another one. Billions still flow to Ukraine. Another example of incredible misinformation. This is so misleading because most of the money never leaves the United States. It funds the American defense manufacturing sector, and it creates jobs in that sector. And this weakens Russia. Every time we send arms to Ukraine, it weakens Russia without using any American troops to do so. And weakening Russia has been bipartisan US policy for decades. And it's good policy, and that's exactly what it should be. We should fight Russia. We should fight their totalitarianism. And the fact that these people don't want to, again, reveals who they really are. It reveals who they really are. All right. Anyway, it's just hard. It's hard. It's hard to read this stuff, really, because you're mired. You get so mired down into just lies and delusions and things that are so far detached from reality. And I just read this stuff. I'm like, really? Somebody really thinks this? Like, think for 2 minutes and you realize everything you've just said is wrong. All right, mass deportations started strong, but millions of illegals still remain while amnesty whispers haunt us. Okay? Well, let's take a look at this. First of all, deporting millions of aliens here legally or not overnight is logistically impossible and legally constrained. And the proof that it's logistically impossible is they can't even get up to their quota of 3,000 a day across the nation. They can't do it. It's too hard. These people think you just push a button and this stuff happens, but that's not how things work. Plus, due process applies even to undocumented immigrants. Yes, that's right. It does. It's in the Constitution. So mass roundups, if you did these mass roundups, since every person has the right for a hearing, it would collapse the courts and it would violate asylum law and trigger injunctions. Why aren't they all gone yet? Is not a serious policy critique. I mean, these people are living in fantasy land, seriously. All right, number 5, DEI got gutted in federal agencies, but woke hiring policies still secretly infest most of American schools and universities and industries. I mean, what do they think? Seriously, we're in a dictatorship? The federal government doesn't control hiring in private companies or local schools. It has no say over that. Ending DEI everywhere would require unconstitutional federal coercion. But hey, when you want a dictator, that's what you want, and that's what you expect, and that's why they talk like this. This is a complaint about our constitutionally established federal system. Big surprise. Another MAGA argument against the Constitution. Who would have thought that could ever happen, right? All right. Next, big media lies and hides behind the First Amendment. Yes, it sure does. The First Amendment exists precisely to protect unpopular or critical speech. If the government decides what counts as lies, then the free press is dead. You can't have the president go out there and order media companies to be shut down, and yet that's exactly what he's trying to do, and he's threatened to do, and all of you support it. You all support it. In other words, you don't support free speech. You actually support government censorship on speech and government shutting speech down that you don't like. Look, just because the media can be critical doesn't mean they're lying. Criticism doesn't equal lies. And show me one president in American history that the media wasn't critical of. This guy's a crybaby, running little crybaby, victimized all the time, always the victim. Cry, oh, they said mean things about me. I'm going to get my FCC guy to shut them down. I mean, it's insane. Like, grow up, be an adult. All other presidents were man enough to take the criticism, and the few women who have run for president have been man enough to take the criticism as well. All right. All right. FBI reforms promise, but no public accounting for Russiagate or January 6th overreach. I mean, January 6th overreach to me means the fact that Trump led a group of people trying to overthrow the government on January 6th. So with it's such an upside down world. By January 6th overreach, I think she means that the government went in and arrested a bunch of patriots for doing what patriots should do, for trying to overthrow the government when the election didn't go their way. Pretty amazing, right? Look, Russiagate produced indictments and convictions. January 6th resulted in hundreds of prosecutions, hundreds of legal prosecutions that went through the courts. They were all handled by the courts. They were not handled by the FBI. So you talk about FBI reforms promised, but no, nothing on 2020 election steal. That's not the FBI's job. That goes through the courts, okay? So you don't even know what what parts of government are supposed to perform which functions. All right. When she says no accounting, no public accounting, she really means is it, well, it was results I don't like. I don't like the results. And that's what they all mean. Every time they don't like what somebody says, they say that person's lying, they say that person's giving fake news or whatever. But they are the ones who are lying to all of us. And if you're believing them, just stop being a sucker. The rest of us know. Everybody knows. I think even the people who pretend to believe them or act like they believe them, I think they know deep in their hearts that something's wrong. At least the honest people. Anyway, abortion funding quietly continues through loopholes, she complains. Well, the Hyde Amendment still bans federal funding for abortions except for rape, incest, or life of the mother. So if some money gets through for those reasons, that's not a loophole. That's the law. So if you don't like the law, guess what? Your party controls everything in Washington, D.C. by large enough majorities to make anything happen. So get them to change the law. Why haven't they changed the law? Why do you still support a party that promises to change these laws and never does? That's a question you might want to ask yourself. All right, last but not least, and it's probably the most crazy one, RINOs throwing primaries to Democrats. Okay, primaries are run by state parties and voters. Losing primaries isn't evidence of sabotage. Losing primaries is usually evidence that you had a bad candidate and people don't like you and they don't like your party and they don't like what you're doing. And this post is a perfect illustration of why we don't like it, because you're literally arguing for dictatorship. You want a dictator for president. You don't want a democratically elected president who has to follow laws. And that's why some of these things that you want to happen have gotten held up, because our laws and our Constitution don't allow it. And you don't like that, do you? You're not happy with that. You're not happy with the fact that our Constitution doesn't allow half the things you want done. And you call yourself a constitutional conservative. Get out of here. Get out of here with your lies. Honestly, I'm just sick of it. I'm literally sick of all these lies. I really am. Her list exposes the fact that she and so many MAGA people have authoritarian fantasies. What they're saying boils down to ignore the courts, override the states, prosecute enemies without evidence, silence the press, deport millions overnight, and skip due process. Those are authoritarian fantasies. That's authoritarian dream world. And the irony is they call Biden and Harris and Democrats communist. But not only do they embrace the chief communist leader of the world, Vladimir Putin, they embrace the same tactics that communist regimes worldwide have historically used. That's what this woman is advocating for in this post. She's basically saying, you know what? She's basically saying, Trump, We love you, man, but you haven't done enough. You haven't become communist enough. You haven't become enough of a dictator. That's literally what she's saying. And that's really what this is all about. You want to boil it all down? This is what the two sides are. And this is why they're so different. And this is why they can't get along. They would never understand each other. One side wants a dictator to force everyone else to do what they want, and the other side doesn't want anything to do with the dictator. And if you grew up as a conservative and a Republican, you grew up on the side that didn't want a dictator. So why have you switched sides? It's time to think about that. Make no mistake, when you hear these people claim to be conservative and claim to love America and freedom and democracy, the exact opposite is the truth. The truth is the exact opposite. And the proof is in her comments and all the people who replied to her and cheered her on. That's the proof. Think about it. Think what we used to stand for when we used to call ourselves Republicans. And tell me, how can you support what she's expressing here? Tell me, what she says here isn't nearly an exact copy. Tell me how it's not an exact copy of how authoritarian communist regimes work. I'd like to hear your explanation. Leave a comment and explain. And by the way, gratuitous personal insults aren't arguments and they aren't explanations. So let's see if you can do that without the insults, okay? Can you defend this woman's comments without resorting to personal insults? Let us know. Leave your comments. Hey, I appreciate you watching, and if you enjoyed this or got anything out of it, like and subscribe. I'd love to have you on board, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.